Charleston County Planning Commission meeting. Please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Today's meeting was noticed in compliance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. This commission acts in review and recommending capacity for the comprehensive plan amendments, text amendments to the Charleston County zoning and land development regulations, ordinance, rezonings, and plan developments. The commission has decision-making authority on road name change requests, public project reviews, appeals of administrative decisions on final plats and subdivision matters, as well as other matters pursuant to Chapter 29, Title 6, Section 6-29-340 of the Code of Laws of South Carolina as amended. If you wish to speak at today's meeting, please fill out the sign-in sheet by the door. My name is Pete Pilatus, Vice Chair. Cindy Floyd, our Chair, is not able to attend the meeting. For those who cannot see the nameplates, other members in attendance to my right are Luke Morris, Marlena Davis, and Adam McConnell, and to my left, David Kent, Warwick Jones, and Logan Davis. Also seated to my right is Commission Attorney Mark Bell, and seated to my left is Joel Evans, Director of Zoning and Planning. I'll ask Joel to introduce his staff in attendance.
Sure. Also at the table here, Andrew Melisick, the Deputy Director. We also have Marche Miller. She's at the table as well. Savannah Murray is here. And also Emily Pickett and Monica Eustace. We also have some other staff members that are not in my department here today to answer some questions. Eric Adams is here with Public Works, and Karen Green as well. She's our Chief Resilience Officer.
Thanks, Joel. I would like to remind everyone that in order to get a good recording of the meeting for the minutes, please speak loudly and clearly into your microphones, and please do not talk over one another. First item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 13, 2023 meeting. Is there a motion and a second?
Second.
Ask Marche to call the roll, please.
Logan Davis. Aye. Commissioner Marlena Davis.
Abstain.
Commissioner Jones.
Aye.
Commissioner Kay.
Aye.
Commissioner McConnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Morris.
Aye.
Commissioner Pilatus.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you. The next item on the agenda is a vote to amend the Planning Commission rules and procedures to hold chair and vice chair elections in March of each year. Hopefully everybody saw that in their packet. Is any discussion? If not, is there a motion and a second?
Second.
All right, I'll ask for a roll call vote again.
Commissioner Logan Davis. Commissioner Marlena Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones.
Aye.
Commissioner Kent.
Aye.
Commissioner McConnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Morris.
Aye.
Commissioner Pilatus.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the comprehensive plan review. I'll ask Monica Eustace and Savannah Murray to make the presentation.
Good afternoon. This afternoon, we come before you with 5 more elements for your review. We're going to start with the land use element, but we'll also have the population, housing, priority investment, implementation and coordination element, and the resilience element to go over. In the land use element, most of the changes that were made to the background and existing conditions sections. We did update the charts and maps, and we amended the goal statement and land use LU4 and added LU19, and proposed a new land use strategy as well. Most of this was just updating the information on current statistics and facts, and we also updated the overlay district maps that were included in the previous version of the comp plan. You can see on the public comments section of the survey results that the land use goal to protect our cultural and natural resources while accommodating smart growth that respects the unique character and landscape of the county, promotes sustainable economic opportunity, fosters resilience, respects private property rights, and is tightly coordinated with transportation infrastructure planning and with the provision of other community facilities. How that was amended from the previous goal statement. And you'll see how land use strategy 4 was proposed to add to the end of that strategy, requiring pedestrian connectivity between communities and local amenities, and ensuring that the infrastructure required to support development, including public transportation systems, is in place prior to development approvals. And a new land use element strategy to investigate the feasibility of limiting development in areas prone to flooding. The comments in pink are comments that did not pertain to land use, and the comments in gray were addressed elsewhere in the comp plan. Did y'all have any questions or comments about the land use section?
Jones.
Forgive me, I know I just feel it should be said at this stage. When staff discuss
Goodbye.
I think there's a conspiracy.
I agree.
Oh, okay. Wouldn't it be appropriate actually to just refer to the discussion with staff about dealing with some of the things that we're about to discuss, and that the possibility of forming committees to address these things and some of the issues that may arise? I was thinking of cutting across the discussion that may go on and on about some of the things that are there and which could be resolved at a committee meeting. I mean, I don't want to steal the chair's thunder, but maybe somebody ought to address that so we don't keep on talking about something that's going to be addressed in the future.
Sure. So I think we've brought it up at one of the previous meetings, maybe the meeting before our last. Maybe Mr. Kent suggested breaking out into groups and subcommittees and looking at the different elements and incorporating the comments. What we're hopeful of today is we're hearing the changes that staff has incorporated into the plan already. The proposed language that for Planning Commission's consideration, we think it would be best to continue to have the comprehensive plan out in the community for that next phase, gather the input, and then once we have all of that input, break out into our subcommittees and maybe address these once we have all of that input from the public, rather than doing it now, taking it out to the public and then having to do it a second time. Any comments, concerns from commission?
I think it's reasonable.
Okay. So,
You okay with that?
Yes, yes. I would applaud it, actually, yes.
okay, so as staff presents today, certainly ask questions where needed. And if we have any of these items that we wish to discuss, make changes to, certainly feel free to bring it up. But understand that we will have a time to revisit this and weigh in on it in more depth and detail at a future date.
So I guess from our point of view, staff's point of view, does everyone sort of understand what we're, and the yellow coded sheets on the left-hand column were the verbatim comments that we got from the public from the survey. And then at one of the planning commission meetings, a couple of meetings back, it was requested by planning commission that staff give their first effort in coming up with a way to address those yellow coded comments into a potential action into the comp plan, primarily strategy, but objective as well. So that's what we've done. And but what we want to do, I think it sounds like the planning commission wants to review those, but maybe not get stuck or hung up on trying to dissect what staff had come up with to address that, but review them. If there's any glaring changes, we can change them, but take it out into the public, because that was part of the process for the comp plan, was to go out into the public like we normally do. And then we'll bring all that back to subcommittees that are created by planning commission to then take to the planning commission as a whole. Right.
I just add to that. I think, speaking for myself, doing all this was a hell of a job. And really, I don't think that I did it effectively, in that I didn't read everything. I read a lot of it. But there were things there that I thought could have been changed, and obviously I don't have the authority to change it. But I think the committee, if you had more time, could address the whole of the element, not only the stuff that is in blue, but stuff that wasn't changed, because I feel some of that stuff could be deleted, as you know. And I think if we go to a committee for this, then we will have time and more, how shall I say, more opinion as to the changes.
Right. Yeah. And we don't have to select the members for that subcommittee today. That could go, be selected at the next meeting. I know we have 2 members that are gone, so probably good to have as many members here as possible to sort of y'all decide who wants to be on which committees for the elements. So each one of the elements will be, a committee will be formed for at least one of the elements, but more than likely, I'm thinking it might be 2 or 3 elements. There might be as many as 3 committees, right?
John.
Yeah.
No, it was wireless. So, yeah, and after talking with Pete and Joel earlier today, I think it was really helpful to kind of wrap my head around the process and kind of what I'm hearing and how I'm thinking this meeting would go. Because I have some things that I would like to offer as options for changes to some elements or some element strategies, kind of for discussion, but that any of those ideas that could go out then to the public gets feedback, and then we break into subcommittees that would go further into detail. And if that sounds good to everyone, I'd like to go through some things for the land use element with some strategy recommendations or suggestions, if we're at that point, or if y'all wanted to continue the presentation.
Well, we're in the land. We're doing the land use presentation now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I guess I was hopeful that as a body, we could consider all of the public input before we start significantly changing the plan.
Okay.
I think there will be an opportunity to do as you said. I'm concerned with the timeline that we have. If we get into too many details of trying to fine tune it at this point, take it out to the public, gather more input, and then we'll be doing that same process all over again. We only have so many meetings in order to get this finalized and get it to county council.
What can I say? I'm interested to hear what he has to say, but if he can do it in 5 minutes, fine.
Yeah, I can absolutely do it
I
in
mean,
5 minutes.
I myself have comments on all of the land use elements, and some of it is pretty minute, and I
Why
think,
don't we open it up for discussion, and if we find we're getting in the weeds, maybe we can,
well, I'm happy, well, maybe, I don't know whether other people have got something to comment, but I think the object is to save time.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can also just email these. So to your point, and because this is a conversation, I guess now about process, it was opened up to the public to get essentially comments online. We've gone through those comments. I feel like it would be good to get discussion on those comments as well as additional suggestions from this body, and then it goes back out to the public.
Sure.
And then their review, like what if they hate what the 9 of us come up with, and then the public wants to comment on that then. So I completely understand the concept, like the comment on time. I just feel like that would be, or this would be the time to kind of do that. So not to belabor it, there were, I guess I'll just hit on my biggest point about land use. There's a lot of conversation in these strategies about, I'm trying to condense now, about essentially coordinating with different land use patterns, transportation, housing, employment. So that's like LU4. There's that delineation between the urban growth boundary and added density within that, as well as maintaining more rural characteristics outside the urban growth boundary. I think there's some opportunities in some of those strategies to reinforce that, which I'm all for. And then there's the conversation of connectivity, which I had this idea, and I know that we don't have the transportation element today, but throughout the ZLDR, there are, especially in overlay zones, where it's kind of the onus is put on whoever is developing the site. And that's not just developers of land that's never been developed on. It could be a tenant that is repurposing a building, and they may need to, based on the ZLDR requirements, add a sidewalk or a multimodal path. And this would be kind of transferring it from that private realm of responsibility to the public realm as seeing it as part of public transportation infrastructure. Hopefully that makes sense, and I can also email that idea out. But essentially to promote public connectiveness through like sidewalks and multimodal pathways within the urban growth boundary as a part of public infrastructure, not just private infrastructure. And then also a concept that, because there's this idea of increased density within the urban growth boundary and reduce outside the urban growth boundary. Again, like I'd say I'm all for that, and I think there's opportunities to reinforce that. But there's also that connection with flooding. Obviously, we know that we can have flooding issues, and that's part of the resilience element. But it's also a land use topic. And I would like to see some kind of, like right now you could call our ZLDR or zoning in general as a flat earth kind of zoning. And I think that there's opportunities to reinforce higher intensity development on higher land within the urban growth boundary. And then reduction in that density at lower levels. Hopefully I've condensed that enough. I know it's kind of a lot to pack in a small.
Just to be provocative, very interesting, but I think you've reinforced my feeling that we need subcommittees.
Yeah.
Because I would hate to address all of those issues at today's meeting, which would probably finish at about 7.
Yeah. No, and I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted that we're still really, I would say, still at the beginning period of this. There'll be opportunity, we hope, for more public input, opportunities for planning commission, and then whatever package gets put together by staff to planning commission as a whole, there'll be public process there as well. So I think that that's good to get these ideas out on the table, but I wouldn't worry too much right now. We're, like I said, we're still at the beginning process. We can get all that stuff laid out, either in public or through the subcommittees or again back to the planning commission. But since we do have Eric Adams here with Public Works. He was kind enough to agree at the last minute to come. If someone does have any particular questions about the sidewalk issue, Luke, I know we spoke about that earlier. In our ordinance, in the unincorporated Charleston County, we do have a requirement that sidewalks are required as part of a development. But if you want Eric, while he's here, to address Public Works' policies with sidewalks, he might be able to speak on that.
And right now, that's just a me issue.
Okay.
Like we had discussed before,
Yes, okay.
but if you think that it's beneficial for everybody, but otherwise, I can
I'll
just
leave that
talk
up
with
to the
them
planning
later.
commission. I just wanted to open
or
that up. I'll
separately.
leave that up to the planning commission.
I just want to say that you're not alone on me issues. You were at the last meeting, right?
Yeah, we will have the opportunity in the subcommittees to
Okay.
get into things like that and make more significant changes to the plan as the subcommittee sees fit, brings it to the commission, and we can discuss it
Okay.
in detail there. So, any other questions or comments for
Okay, sorry.
Mr. Collins?
Just in terms of the potential actions, the first one, I just wanted to get sort of clear on the language a little bit. I think that we kind of get stuck with some jargon here or there talking about smart growth and resiliency, and those things are not defined. So my concern is that, I think we may have some understanding what we think smart growth is, but I don't know if the public does, and I'm not sure that our policymakers do either. And so I think that those things should be defined somewhere if we're going to include them in that language. And then I certainly applaud the effort to sort of include infrastructure improvements on development. It seems like we're focused primarily on transportation, but we're not looking at other systems, sewer, water, storm water, all the other systems as well could play a role there. So I just was curious as why we are focused on transportation systems, particularly the public transportation systems, understanding the stress that Carter's under currently, that may become limiting in some way. I'm not sure how you implement that or what that policy actually looks like down the road. So why limit it just to transportation, and then also what does that look like? Those are my two comments about that.
I mean, I can try to answer some of that. As far as the transportation part, so we do have a requirement for traffic studies, and we do keep hearing more and more from the public about development or infrastructure, and it is usually in particular roads are not built before the developments are approved. So a policy that would be a potential policy, be up to county council, that would come from a comment like that would be, hey, you can't have but a certain number of lots in a subdivision until there's transportation improvements, rather than just saying, okay, we know that there will be road improvements coming in the future. It's not here yet, but we're still going to approve this, 1,200 unit subdivision without that infrastructure in place. It's possible that county council could come up with a policy that could address that, or at least start to address it in a little bit more of a meaningful way. Yeah.
One thing that I've seen Berkeley County, Dorchester County, and some of the other fast-growing areas incorporate is they oftentimes, historically, the developer will provide the traffic study, right? So that engineering group is working for the developer, and the interest of the public are not necessarily taken into consideration with those. I know numbers are numbers, but certainly you can change the boundary conditions of those models to kind of tell them what you wanted to say to some extent. So what Dorchester County and Berkeley County have done is they've said, okay, essentially we are going to have on call a handful of traffic engineers that will do the traffic studies to our specifications, and the developer will then pay, right, a fee for that, so that you get consistency in how your traffic studies are conducted, and you have a team of people who can look at how oftentimes, if you're developing a large tract of land, which there are some in the unincorporated areas, you know, the first development gets a pass, the second development gets a pass, the third development gets a pass, and the fourth one hits that threshold which says now you need, an intersection, or you need, a roundabout or something on that idea, and they get stuck with all the costs, and that burden of that impacts are not spread equally throughout the entire development. I think that those are some ideas. I don't know how we get there, but those are some ideas I think we need to consider moving forward.
It's almost like a top-down approach is needed to take an inventory of not just Charleston County's land and the uses that go along with it, but Berkeley and Dorchester. And you know where your office, commercial, industrial areas are, where your residential areas are. Seeing that out into the future, how they're built out, if people, or if we're encouraging development or zoning is in certain areas for people to live and then work, how does the traffic and infrastructure move at a top level rather than taking it piece by piece? I think is maybe what you referenced.
I think to some extent, yeah. And in that capacity as well, I think we need to look at, especially these sort of tract home developments that happen and so forth. You don't create any public realm oftentimes, right? You don't create any. You may have some green space requirements, but it's not an activated green space like a public plaza or something. And we also don't require a certain amount of sort of commercial activity, right? We all think about places, and I was talking about with John earlier, like Park Circle or Avondale, these areas where people want to live. They have a lot of homes nearby, a lot of population density, and they have places to go, and those are desirable places. And too often, I think we're building places without that, which impacts our transportation systems, and all those other issues get exacerbated. So we may think about considering those types of things as well in this sort of larger scale.
And traffic studies for those types of developments look different. One that has a commercial workable area where you're close by versus just home sites where everyone has to travel a far distance to work, go shopping, etc.
Good. I mean, Eric, do you have anything to add to that conversation about the issue of development before infrastructure? I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure, I can talk to it real quick. The idea about the traffic study is outstanding. I think that's a really good idea.
Eric, can you speak into that? Just because it's the recording.
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I'm Eric Adams, the Deputy Director of Public Works. So I do like that uniformity idea with traffic studies. A lot of problems we end up with is different jurisdictions as well. You got DOT, municipalities, so kind of different things going on there. The infrastructure needs, it's a financial burden. The cost to build anything now is escalated tremendously. We're up in our estimates 20% on the existing projects that we have as part of the second transportation sales tax. So that's the big caveat there is where does the funding come from to support it? I believe y'all probably know more than I do about Mount Pleasant and the way they've gone about their impact fees and kind of accumulated funds over time, and then they've been able to deliver transportation projects in that way. But it is a struggle for us, the financial burden. With sidewalks, just to speak to that very quickly, we have $1 million a year allocated to the second sales tax for sidewalks. That doesn't get a lot of sidewalks built. So those are really our restrictions, is really we just don't have the money to do as much as we really need to do in that element.
Thanks, Eric.
Perhaps there should be something in here getting council to find additional sources of revenue to fund these projects as well.
Well, I mean, this body has discussed the impact fee possibility, so that's something that could be taken to council for them to consider. That'd be another source of revenue.
I think that comment too, my comment would be that it reinforces the idea of a subcommittee because all of these are very worthwhile and better discussed at a subcommittee. The only thing that I would add, Adam has said we need to have a definition of smart growth. I think that's a good idea. One of my suggestions, which I think the staff agreed to adopt, was that at the beginning, and maybe on each chapter, there is a section or at the beginning which has all of the important entities, in particular the urban growth boundary. It's spelled out about 20 times when UGB would be sufficient, and maybe just a definition of what it is, and maybe some of the items like smart growth in the particular chapter, that should be there part of it. And of course, maybe I'm sounding political, but I did read the term that developers should be ensured that they pay their fair share of the cost. I would like to know how you define fair share, but anyhow, that's just my sort of thought.
Chairman, I really agree with Commissioner McConnell, and I appreciate all the work that the staff has done to shrink this down into one statement. And my concern from a very, very, very layperson perspective is that shrinking it down into that one statement makes it very vague. And so I agree that we need to be very specific about the things that we're asking for. It sounds good, and it is good. It is a nice statement, but it doesn't have any teeth specifically. It's just like a nice gloss over of everything, and I'm not sure if that is what our role is supposed to be.
So, again, I don't disagree with you, and I think we will have the opportunity to expand on it after we collect all the public input, break out into committees, and hash it out in more detail. Any other questions or comments? I'll ask Monica to continue on. And for members of the public here, I think we'll open up public comment at the end of the presentation of all the elements rather than taking them one by one.
Okay, the second element we're dealing with is the population element. And again, most of the changes are made were to the background and existing conditions section. We updated the charts and graphs and used the more up-to-date data so we could bring these figures into the present. In the public comment from the survey, we amended the goal statement and strategy P1, population 1, and we added a new population strategy as well as a new housing strategy, which will be incorporated into the housing element. And again, the gray, comments in gray were addressed elsewhere in the document, and the comments in pink were not applicable. Did you have any questions or comments about the population section?
Questions, comments? I think we're good.
Okay. Moving on to the housing element. The changes, again, were concentrated in the background and existing conditions section. We were able to update the charts, graphs, and maps to focus on the current information. We worked with the housing department on their, and they gave us their comments, and we incorporated those. And in the in the strategies, we added strategy number 10, and from the comments that we received from the public survey, we amended the goal statement and added 2 new housing strategies. And again, the gray, yellow, and pink coloring is consistent throughout the document. Any questions?
Just curious, the amount of apartments that we've seen being built in the last 5 years. I'm looking at the renters versus owner occupied. I wonder if we have any projections on if that's going to change the renters versus owner occupied. We're at in 2021, Charleston County 66% owner occupied and 34% are renters. Because there has just been an explosion of apartments being built. It would be good to know. I don't know if we can, if the data is available.
I guess a lot of the apartments activity that we see is outside of the county.
Well, outside of the unincorporated
Outside
parts
of the
right,
unincorporated.
right, yeah. So I think it's the proliferation of apartments is, usually that's a direct result of what the market can stand with that. It is, and in the old days, it used to be a form of affordable housing. I don't think it's so much so anymore, but it's the housing demand that's driving the market.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's not enough detached or single-family homes that are available.
Right. So, Savannah, did you have something to say about that? I think you worked on that. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, based on like the data that we've seen, they do say that like the number is gonna increase for the renters, but with so many people moving here and others needing different types of housing, because like the average household size is getting smaller, so there's a need for a lot of. We have a high need for like 1 bedroom, 2 bedrooms. So like it's getting smaller, but also more of an issue because of the people moving here and then with the housing size shrinking. So kind of, but not enough.
Any other questions, comments?
Just a comment about the diverse housing options. I think we did a decent job with some of the text amendments we made over the past couple of years of allowing for that and creating smaller lot sizes and those types of things. I just want to make sure that sort of persists, right? That sort of that idea of that missing middle housing, that not the apartments and not the single family detached, but those other sort of lower gentle density type developments, whether that's duplexes, quadruplexes, or what have you, are viable, in the current market. And so a question that I have is whether or not, and this is truly radical, and I just want to throw it out there as an idea and then let it get shot down. But like we often have density maximums, right? You can only do the X, Y, and Z. If we're going to look at areas where we are going to say, okay, this is high ground along a major transit corridor, right? This is high value development land for the future that we're going to need. Is there an opportunity to say there's a density minimum? Like you have to meet some FAR, right, on that corridor in order to make a viable project go. And that's something that I think should be discussed, considered at least.
I think it's a really good idea. And since it's been mentioned a couple times about the elevation and the density, as you all probably know, the city of Charleston's hired a consultant to redo their zoning ordinance, and I think a large part of it, my understanding from my conversations with the city staff, that that elevation-based zoning, or whatever you want to call it, is part of the consultants, what they're going to be looking at. I've requested that from the city staff to let us know, the county staff, planning staff, when those particular discussions will start up, because I think that's something that since the city has taken on the ability to have a consultant help them with that, we can start looking at that as well, and maybe be able to adopt something or present something to you all and to county council at the same time that the city starts considering it, so that we're on the same page and hopefully be able to move forward with that.
Anything else?
Just to be clear, are y'all saying there would be a minimum amount of density that would be required on a particular parcel?
Right. I think that the idea is given that we have an issue in Charleston County where we just have an influx of folks, there's not enough houses. If for some reason that you are going to develop your property, it's on a major thoroughfare that has less traffic issues maybe than others, and it happens to be on high ground, which is the more preferable place to put higher density, then we would not necessarily allow someone to break it up into 1 acre lots and put one house on each lot. That you would get a density bonus, or there'd be a minimum density to help take those houses off of the market and put them in a place where it makes sense to have them, where it doesn't flood a lot, where it has access to infrastructure. Right.
It's almost like an overlay district for,
Possibly, or yes, overlay district, but really based on the elevation and access to transportation. So it could be something that would just be a qualifier for the density and not necessarily a mapped out district, but we'll see where all that goes.
I would be interested in Mark's analysis of that and the legality of enforcing something like that.
And at the moment, it'd be something we'd have to look at as a particular scenario would be presented to us. But right now, it's just difficult to say one way or another.
Mr. Jones.
This is it's probably likely to be academic, really, isn't it? Because presumably profitability follows density. So if you have the opportunity of having 50 units to an acre as opposed to one, you'll, maybe I exaggerate, 10, because you're going to make more profit. And most of us, perhaps all of us, are motivated by profit and don't seek out losses. You would go for the highest density. So what am I saying? Maybe such a rule may be redundant or not necessary.
But it may require us to go back and look at the zoning along those major we need to identify where those areas are. And there may be a zoning mismatch there where we have single-family zone parcels along major thoroughfares that are on high ground. We may need to evaluate that at a minimum and allow the market to take its.
Anna?
All right, we're gonna get into the priority investment implementation and coordination element. Like the other elements, most of the updates made here were done in the background and existing conditions, with some changes being made to some of the strategies in the element, adding, continuing to work on, and updating some of the major planning efforts and projects in the element. Also adding in an updated major planning efforts map. And then we just move through and come to the public comments of those who were surveyed or who responded. 68% felt like the goals and strategies were appropriate. Here you see in the gray those public survey comments that were addressed already somewhere else in the document. And then we have the yellow comments, which are looking to amend the goal statement. And then you have that, as well as the pink comments, like earlier, which were not applicable to the section. So that is the priority investment and implementation and coordination element. Any questions on that one?
Questions, comments? Great.
Okay. So moving into resilience. Much like the other sections, a lot of it was updating the background information as well as adding in updated charts and data. So we can see this one, just showing the watershed and storm surge maps. Moving through to the public comments. And this shows the changes that were made to the action items for this section. And we see that 75% of those who responded to the survey felt like the strategies and goals were applicable for the next 5 years. Again, in the gray, the comments that were already addressed. And in this section, we have changes to be made to the goal statement, as well as an action item added to strategy RE1. Were there any questions about the resilience element?
Questions, comments?
Okay, moving on to the vision statement. So there really were only yellow comments for this section. Of those who were surveyed, 61% felt like the vision statement was appropriate for the next 5 years. And as you can see, we took all the comments, and this is the statement that we came up with, shortening our vision statement as a whole, and also adding in a lot of what was suggested by the public. And all of those were put into that one shortened statement.
And that was one of the consistent comments we got back.
Yes.
Was that the vision statement was way too long and had a lot of information in it that people didn't think were appropriate for the vision statement. So
Kind of lose your vision.
you kind of lose your vision after about the third paragraph.
Yeah.
The vision's lost, right?
Any questions or comments on resilience?
All right, and Monica will be up to, oh, sorry.
Mr. McCollum?
I just actually, I'll wait till the end. Thank you.
And we received public comments after the close of the public input survey, and we summarized these. We received over 140 letters and emails, and then we received some more comments just as of last Friday. So we updated the slides from what we included in the packet. Again, over 140 letters and emails suggesting changes to the land use element goal. The staff response was that the change has been addressed in proposed changes to the land use element goal. Protect the cultural and natural resources while accommodating smart growth that respects the unique character and landscape of the county. Promotes sustainable economic opportunity, fosters resilience, and is tightly coordinated with the transportation infrastructure planning with the provision of other community facilities. And the next suggestion was for, also in the land use element, to change the future land use residential densities. The staff response was that no changes to the future land use residential densities table should be made. Instead, we would include a recommendation in table 3.9.1, priority recommendations for 2023 to 2028, and section 3.9.5A, major planning efforts and projects to review and amend the comprehensive plan and ZLDR as applicable to increase open space, clustering, and other requirements necessary to achieve the increased density of one dwelling per 4 acres through the plan development process, and to better define open space as it relates to plan developments with a time frame recommendation of 2 to 3 years. In the definitions section, it was suggested that there be a change to the definition of open space. Staff response was to change the definition of open space to any parcel of highland or portion thereof exclusive of impervious surfaces set aside, dedicated, designated, or reserved for either public or private use or enjoyment, or for the use and enjoyment of owners, occupants, and/or their guests of land adjoining or neighboring such open space. This is also included in the staff recommendation to address the open space definitions and requirements as they relate to planned developments discussed on the previous slide. In the priority investment element, we received suggestions to change section 3.9.5A, major planning efforts and projects, to add the rural Johns Island overlay zoning district. And the staff response is that the future land use recommendations and current zoning address these concerns. Therefore, staff recommends a review of the land uses allowed in the agricultural zoning districts on Johns Island to prioritize agricultural, silviculture, equestrian, and other agriculturally related uses. This can be included as a work plan item in Table 3.9.1 with a time frame recommendation of 2 to 3 years, with a description of the project in Section 3.9.5.A, major planning efforts and projects. And we received suggestions for the priority investment element for tree and forest protection, Section 3.9.5A. Initial response is that this is not a comprehensive plan issue. The issue is addressed in the zoning and land development regulations. Staff recommends no change. That was our initial response. Updated response is that add to Table 3.9.1 priority recommendations 2023 to 2028 and Section 3.9.5.A major planning efforts and projects a review/amendment of the comprehensive plan and CLDR to prohibit clear cutting of properties and incentivize the retention of swaths of trees with a time frame of 2 to 3 years. Any questions about any of these items? And then at the end of your packet, you'll see the letters and emails that we received attached, so you could peruse those. I think that's it.
All right. Thank you, Monica. We appreciate the staff's comprehensive report. Any other questions of staff before we move on to public comment? Mr. McConnell?
One comment that came to mind I wanted to speak to, and it was brought to my attention by Jason Crawley, formerly of the Coastal Conservation League. He had talked for a long time. There's some initiative in here about limiting development in flood-prone areas, but there are development opportunities by right at this point in time. A complex solution to that, if we want to limit it, it would probably be seen as a taking in some respects. So there's been hesitancy, I think, to implement any policies to do that. But the idea of the transfer of development rights from low-lying lands to higher lands would be something to consider as an option that would allow for the preservation of those lands in the flood-prone areas, and also the densification of those areas where we should have it. And so it's an idea worth considering.
And piggybacking on that, it would be like a voluntary system. And even if you can privately exchange those rights, I know that I've talked with planning about it, and it can be very convoluted, but any way to make that an easy system would be great.
Do we have a definition of flood-prone area? I mean, because we've got flood zones, right? But doesn't mean it's going to flood at least every year. So I guess that's one thing I would like to have some kind of comment on, that flood-prone areas are what, and what definition, because, you know, a house in an 88 may not have flooded in the last 20 years. Is that something we need to try to find?
I think if we start looking at this, especially if we start looking at the flood elevation development issue, we would have to identify all that. I know that the Public Works Stormwater Department has identified areas within certain parts of the county that tend to flood more than others. Most of the time, it's because it's the lowest elevation in a certain area, but sometimes I think, and Eric, chime in if you can or want to. Sometimes it's the way that the stormwater infrastructure has been developed in the area that makes a certain property flood more than others. So,
Like downtown, I mean, we have no really detention or retention ponds.
Right.
We got old pipes. I get that. That could be a flood prone area, but if you're developing a new tract of land that's in a AE and you've designed all the latest engineering formulas you can, is that considered a flood prone area? I don't know. I'm just going on.
Well, we have the repetitive loss properties. Of course, we know those are flood prone because there's someone's house is on it.
Right.
Right. But there are other areas. I mean, a lot of times it's the streets, but ultimately if it's a public infrastructure like a street, there's an outfall issue there that is, both the city and the county they've been trying to address. And that's part of the bigger picture of what we're trying to look at.
Because I believe when Public Works last time we talked about this, when they develop a piece of property, they don't allow any outflow. No water can go off the property. So is that considered a flood prone area, even though it's in an AE zone or?
I wonder how much of it is affected by older legacy neighborhoods that were not built with the retention areas, and now 30, 40, 50 years later, their stormwater systems are inadequate. They're indirectly using those undeveloped surrounding properties as their retention areas. When developments come to those properties, ultimately get filled, grow up to grade, like you said, they contain their own water, but they're no longer storing the water for those older neighborhoods. Right. I think we've seen some of that in the Highway 61 Shadow Moss area.
And it's a real issue too with the older neighborhoods trying to connect the drainage easements that the county or the city do happen to have. And connecting those has been a real issue because you're now trying to, get the rights on a piece of private property to be able to say, hey, we want to be able to maintain these ditches or add a pipe or relocate it. Public Works is constantly working those issues, and I think it's something that's going to go on for quite a while, probably, right, Eric? Yeah.
Welcome back.
So a couple things. We do have special protection areas within our stormwater program. Those are areas of known flooding where the requirements are more stringent from a stormwater perspective on the calculations. We do look at water running off of sites, and we do take that into calculation. So pre versus post and rate of leaving the site are factors that go in. The big thing that Joel's talking to, the easements, a lot of times what we run into is the older neighborhoods, the maintenance hasn't been upkept, but the bigger thing, the outfalls in the marsh and the tidal areas are now in the critical zone, which is protected by DHEC as well as the Army Corps of Engineers. So for us to get a permit to go in there, it cost us $25,000 in fees and a year of time just to get the permit, if we can, get out there and actually re-excavate ditches that have silted in over time. There's a lot of things going on there. The continuous easement is a problem, especially in developed areas that are being rapidly developed. We want to make sure we get those easements in place so that we can continue to maintain the drainage infrastructure as the development comes in. So a lot of different pieces going on there, but hope that answered your questions.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak regarding the comprehensive plan 5-year review? Please come to the podium and state your name and address.
George Freeman, 1450 Bowman Road, Mount Pleasant. I really don't have a comment. I like the idea that you're going to have subcommittees so I can catch up on everything that you want to do. But my biggest concern would have been with the sweetgrass basket overlay or the S3 zoning, that there's no changes will be made in those areas. But I do have one question. Someone mentioned something about intermodal pathway. Can somebody explain to me what that is?
I think that it was multi-use path. That's I think the 10 to 12 foot wide path that has both a sidewalk.
County's looking at trying to do that also?
Well, I think that is something that, Eric, help me out here. I think that's something that is required on certain roads, but I don't know I don't know when the distinction comes between the requirement of a sidewalk and the requirement of a multi-use path, other than it is something that is addressed in our Maybank Highway overlay as having a multi-use path through zoning. But as far as just road projects, Eric, is there something that that requires multi-use over sidewalks?
So there's industry standards on the widths based on if it's a sidewalk or a multi-use path that can accommodate both bikes and pedestrians.
Right.
No requirement. The way the county looks at it is if we have a project in the area, we'll look at providing transportation for all modes. So
Right.
Look at, your bike, ped, as well as your cars and your transit.
So if there's not a multi-use path that allows a bike and a sidewalk, then more than likely that bike lane is going to be in the new road that's built then. Right. Could be.
Depends on the project and,
Yeah.
and the limits of right of way and all those things. But
Right.
we do try to address all modes of transportation
Right.
in our project areas or when we have a project in there.
There's not a zoning, in the zoning ordinance, there's not a requirement for a multi-use path other than in a few of our overlays. Folly Road was one of them because that's what came out of the community meetings. And that's being designed and built on right now. And then Maybank Highway.
Just making sure it's not a retrofit, that's all. Because we don't want it in the community, that it already exists.
Yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
You didn't ask me for my name.
Please state your name and address.
John's Lawyer, 5528 Frisco Lane, John's Island Task Force. First of all, since the package was out about a week ago, I've had a lot of discussions with Joel and Andrea, and they've made a lot of changes relative to these points, and I really like to thank them for making those changes, those proposed changes. One thing is I wish the time frame was not 2 to 3 years, and I know everybody's got a lot of stuff to do, and there's a lot of things on the plate. But if you look at, since the last time this update was done 5 years ago, we've learned a heck of a lot more about resiliency. We know a lot more about the growth on Johns Island. And quite frankly, 2 to 3 years is an eternity on Johns Island, other places too. But, and I would definitely recommend that these be done sooner than later in terms of looking at these changes. The other thing is, one of the things we need to consider, I think, is we've got different zoning outside the UGB. For example, in Johns Island, it's primarily AGR, RR, and AG8. But things like PDs apply across the board. And we really need to start thinking about having some of those other ordinances be, if you will, urban versus rural. And let me give you an example. In the comp plan right now, it basically says you get, not the ZLDR, but the comp plan right now, it says, and I'm not sure if you're changing this or not, it was tough to see through all that, that you get a density bonus if you conserve 0.2 acres per house. Think about that. If you're an AG8, 0.2 acres is nothing. So we really need to be thinking about, okay, things that might be applicable inside the urban growth boundary, like small numbers like that, probably need to be looked at separately outside the urban growth boundary and say, well, it shouldn't be 0.2, it should be 4 or something of that nature. That's more representative of what's outside the urban growth boundary. So I would love to see something, that may be included in some of these things that you have here. But again, anything that we can do to strengthen the zoning outside the urban growth boundary, it would be fantastic. And let me give you an idea of what I've been talking about with some folks. On Johns Island right now, it's about as of 2020, there's about 20,000 people that live on Johns Island. And the inside the urban growth boundary is about 20% of the island. So about a fifth of the island is inside the urban growth boundary. Now just imagine if over time, if that had the same density as inside as outside, effectively 20,000 people live in 1/5 of the island. If we continue to let things move, you could have 100,000 people living on Johns Island. Now, we won't get to 100,000, but we don't want to get to 50,000 either, right? And anything that we can do to strengthen that boundary. By the way, we need to have development along the high ridges. We need to have development where it's resilient and so forth, where we have the infrastructure. But let's make sure the zoning does that, and hopefully the comp plan will go along with that. Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay. So I think what we're going to do is look for consensus among the commission members. So we'll ask for a motion and a second that would allow the proposed amendments that were discussed today to allow staff to present them to the public workshops and bring them back along with that additional public input for our review, break out into committees, and then a final recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All right. We call a roll.
Commissioner Logan Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Marlena Davis.
Aye.
Commissioner Jones.
Aye.
Commissioner Kent.
Aye.
Commissioner McConnell.
Aye.
Commissioner Moore.
Aye.
Commissioner Pilato.
Aye.
All right, ayes have it.
Thank you. And the next item on the agenda is the director's remarks.
I think Karen, if it's okay, you didn't get to speak, and I wanted the planning commission and anybody else in the audience to know that we have a chief resiliency officer. And Karen, if you want to just give a minute or two about what you do and how your job came about and how you're helping us out with the comp plan, maybe?
Well, I mean, I think everybody know how my job came about, the resilience element. We do have several things going on. Oh, I need to hold it? Sorry. I feel like American Idol. We have got the vulnerability assessment. We signed the contract 2 weeks ago. We are ready to go with that. We have a consultant, Fernleaf. This will kind of be our jumping point, start point for resiliency in the county. We'll have a lot of action items that will come out of that. And then after that, what we need is funding to put those action items to good use. So we're looking forward to that. Thank you.
Thanks. I don't have anything else.
Do you want to talk about the May meeting?
May meeting.
Because we don't have any cases.
Yes.
And since we don't have anything on the comp plan now, did you want to have a May meeting or not?
Well, I mean, you need to discuss, I'd say no.
No discussion.
My only comment is that the sooner the better that we form these subcommittees would be good, I think. Maybe we can't do it until we've had the public meetings, but
What is staff's timeline for the workshops?
Well, I mean, even if we start planning for the workshops, we probably wouldn't be able to start doing them until June, I would think. So we'd start going out to the public in June. We'll have about 5 of them throughout the county. That's the way we've done it in the past. One in East Cooper, one in North Charleston area, one out on Edisto, Johns Island. We won't do Johns Island. That's right.
You already know the answer.
One on James Island, West Ashley area. So yeah.
How long will that take, a couple months?
Yeah, 6 weeks. We'll try to do them once a week, once every 10 days. So yeah.
In terms of the committee breakout, which members are going to serve on which elements, is that something that we need to do as a public body, or is that something?
Yeah.
In order to form a special committee, the planning commission will have to make a motion stating what the purpose of that committee is. And then once that motion is voted upon, then however the body decides to appoint members to that committee can be done at that time. But you will have to make a formal public action by making a motion and going through that process to set up these special committees that will have a specific purpose.
Do we want that to be our May meeting, or?
We could do that and have it done, yeah.
You mean meet just to make the motion?
Just to have the create the subcommittee. I mean, we won't, today would have been good, of course, we have two members, that are not at here. And if we had, well, let me ask staff, Andrea, if we had to push that to June, is it going to make a big difference?
Because then by then we'll have the schedule of when all the workshops will be, so we can give all that information out. And
yeah, I don't think having a meeting just for that is going to be very efficient. So, and especially if we don't necessarily need it at that time. Go ahead.
The relevant question is, how long is it going to take before you have the public meetings and we have to make a final decision? In other words, how long are the subcommittees going to have to deliberate?
So if we were done with the public meetings, in August, we would hope to have something for the subcommittees to look at. I would think a month should be enough, but.
A month? Well, it seems rather short. I personally would like something longer than that, because you've got to get people together. We're going to have to discuss just about every element. Unless, of course, if the energy commitment element, they all agreed with me, it wouldn't take long at all.
Yeah. I want the process to have as much freedom for us to do what we need to do. That's just what we're shooting for. If it goes into September, October, as long as we can get something to council by the end of the year, I think we'll be fine.
Well, can I just say from the top of my head, maybe people should be asked whether they'd like to serve on certain committees to get that going, so we don't sort of just prevaricate forever.
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know.
Mark, can we do that by email, or should we have a meeting for that?
And if the body knows what type of subcommittees that they want, you can make a motion to establish those committees now and
have them approved.
Then determine how you want the chair and vice chair to handle and appointing people to those committees.
Good idea. Yeah.
There'll be a committee for each element, right?
Well,
Probably group some together. I think we did that for the 10-year plan. We had 2 or 3 per group, and then 2 or 3 commissioners per subcommittee.
Okay. So we have 11 elements, right? And, I would think, like the population element, there would not be, that's all data. There's nothing that's being proposed. It is what it is. So if we kept basically 3 subcommittees, I would probably separate land use and energy and sustainability and resilience maybe in a separate committees. I don't know. Yeah, because those are the big ones I would think. But that's up to the planning commission. And then with those 3 have like 3 to 4 people on each one. And not every planning commission member has to be on a subcommittee, but
We would encourage it.
we would encourage it, yeah.
But June would give us, we made the motion in June, we'd have plenty of time to meet, right?
Yeah, because we were planning on not meeting, actually with the subcommittees until after we went out into the public and got more public input.
Right.
Which would probably not be until the September
August.
meeting.
Right.
Possibly. I would like to finish up, if we can do once a week, starting in June, finish up by middle of July. You start having these things in the end of July, August, now you're in vacation, or end of July especially. So the earlier, the better, yeah, for us. We were waiting for this meeting to find out, potentially we could start having our meetings at the end of May, our comp plan meetings, but we'll probably be beginning of June. Yeah. So whatever y'all want to do.
I think it'd be okay to make a recommendation in June and give you, maybe shoot you an email, shoot the chair and vice chair some recommendations they think, how to group it together.
would it be okay if everyone emailed like Marche their interests? Yeah, like I'm interested in this element, and this element, and we could create kind of a matrix for the June meeting so we could
If you
see.
have no preference and willing to serve on any, certainly
Mhm.
indicate that as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think that combining the land use with either the resilience and energy or the resilience that's going to be too heavy. That's going to be too much for that group. So we need to try to split the ones up that I think that are going to be the more, have a lot
And
more
more,
work.
most time.
Yes.
So why don't you just split it up and send out an email to us and say, please think off what you want to serve on?
Okay.
I would like to.
Yeah, we can do that. If you want to do that, is that okay, Pete?
Yeah.
So we'll group them, and then send them out and ask y'all which ones. Yeah, and then we'll make it official at the June meeting, right? Yeah.
Okay.
I'd like to make the comment that, if we do separate the land use from the resiliency, from the energy and X, Y, and Z, some of those components inform the other ones. And so it'd be incumbent upon staff to be able to sort of fold those together.
Yes,
afterwards.
yeah.
So
We'll do
as we're
the
working
best we can
silos
with that. And remember, this is just subcommittee, so then it'll go to planning commission as a whole as well. And we can work out those.
Yeah, in the end, nobody is going to be left out of weighing in on
Right,
another part of the plan.
yeah.
Okay,
All right.
Thank you.
is that it? So do we need to vote no May meeting or?
Yeah, I think we should, that'd be nice.
Okay, so
Second.
all right. So we'll call one more time for not having a May meeting.
Commissioner Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Marlena Davis,
Aye.
Commissioner Jones,
Aye.
Commissioner King,
Aye.
Commissioner McConnell,
Aye.
Commissioner Morris,
Aye.
Commissioner Pilatus.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the chair's remarks. I have none, so if there's no further business, this meeting of the Charleston County Public Planning Commission stands adjourned. Planning Commission will hold its next regularly scheduled meeting on the June 12th, June 12th date, and would be held in county council chambers or here?
Hopefully we're back in county council chambers.
Hopefully in county council chambers.
It's supposed to be open next month is what I've heard.
If the work is completed, otherwise in the committee room. Thank you.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah, good job.
Moving along.